All right, let's get started.
So Vigil.
What?
So welcome, let's get started. My name is Brant Lee. I am a professor of law and assistant dean for diversity and social justice initiatives at the University of Akron School of Law. And on behalf of the University of Akron and the very many organizations who have sponsored this, this event, I'd just like to thank you all for coming. This event did not exist 24 hours ago. And I wanted to start by saying a few words about how it came to be, what the goal is, and then I'll outline a little bit about how the next hour is going to go. Like many of you, I'm sure, I was deeply personally affected by hearing about the events in Atlanta. And I think that because Asians are often such a small minority, I had a lot of feelings and emotions about wanting to be together, but I didn't go to the streets because I didn't think anyone else would be there. And there are a number of organizations planning further out, very good opportunities and events, teach-ins, personal in-person rallies. There's going to be a lot of events next Friday. But there was a sense that the energy needed to be captured now. And so we decided to put this event on tonight. Let me start so I mentioned I would outline what's going on. I'm going to give a little bit of background. Vera Boggs of OCA of Greater Cleveland will also give a little bit of background on how none of this violence against Asian Americans happens in a vacuum. This isn't a single event that we are commemorating, right, or mourning or angry about. It is a whole, this is just the end of a whole long line of history. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then we have 4 Asian American women who will share their experiences and give us a sense of what this issue is really all about. And then we will be hearing from a number of the organizations that have that want to make statements in solidarity and support. And at the end, I will ask you to, if you brought a candle to light, I will ask you to light the candle. We will say a few solemn words. I'm going to ask that the view go to the grid view. Of course, you can control that yourself, so that we can see everybody who has a candle, right, with a candle in front of them. And we'll have a moment of silence. So that's the schedule. So let me say a little bit of history, and then we'll see if Vera Boggs is prepared to say a few words. The consistent theme for Asian Americans in American history is the stereotype of being perceived as forever foreign. Right? It doesn't really matter whether you speak with an accent. It doesn't matter if you were born in Akron, Ohio. And it doesn't even matter if, like me, you were a 5th generation American, right? The perception is still that the Asian person is somehow especially connected to some home country somewhere else, some exotic and different place, and that we are exotic and different people. And sometimes that can seem positive, oh, what interesting and exotic people. But whenever the country goes through a period of stress and we're looking for a scapegoat, that foreignness turns into a reason to be violent against the other. And this has happened through history every couple of decades, right? When the Chinese were run out of mining towns in the West, right? Um, when Asians were prohibited from even becoming citizens, when Asians were prohibited from immigrating, when Japanese Americans were interned, 120,000 people rounded up from the West Coast by force, 2/3 of them American-born citizens. In the 70s and 80s, when the auto industry was under a lot of competition from Japan, and Japan became the enemy, and Vincent Chin, right, was tracked down and beaten to death with a bat in Detroit, because he was Asian, right? He was not even Japanese, like, and which is the other part, the other consistent theme, considered foreign and lumped together, right? Because being Chinese and not Japanese didn't save Vincent Chin's life, right? So we come to the present day and COVID hits, and COVID has its origins in China. And at the outset, nobody was calling it the China virus, right? Not even in the administration. But when the critiques came and the pressure came and the need to find another victim came, then we got the words. And the Kung flu and the Wuhan virus. And, you know, a lot of people will say those words, like, you can't blame all the violence on those words, right? There's not that direct a connection, right? And I think that taken on its isolation, that's true. If we were somehow all a blank slate and, right, and the president said those words, you know, we wouldn't have got all that violence. But we're not a blank slate. We are at the very end of hundreds of years of history following the same pattern, right? So when we, I think, like others are, so affected that we are caught up in emotion and viewing that story, it's not just about that story. It's about all of the assaults that have been experienced through this whole last summer. It's about a lifetime of being singled out and targeted, right, as somehow different and somehow vulnerable because of race. Right? So that's a little bit of background that I wanted to offer for the incidents that happened, right? We will still learn more about you know, what actually happened, but I will tell you that as far as I'm concerned, nothing that we find out will negate the long-term theme, right, that really brings us together today. And of course, the particular lives of the people who were killed, and sort of all the fullness of that. Is Vera Boggs online and available to join us?
Yes, I'm available right now. Sorry, I've been having some technical difficulties.
That's all right. This, you know, one of the things that happens when we bring this together in a flurry in 24 hours is that we have been, you know, not everything is coordinated the way that it might otherwise be. And that's just that's the price of doing this way. So Vera Boggs from OCA
Yes.
Greater Cleveland, welcome and thank you for being here.
Okay, good evening. Sorry I missed part of what you said, Professor Lee, because of technical issues. I have kicked my daughters off Netflix for now, so I should be able to stay on here for a little bit. But pretty much I'm here on behalf of OCA, which is was rebranded from Organizations of Chinese Americans. We are the Northeast Ohio Greater Cleveland chapter. We're part of a national organization. Our goal and mission is to advance the social, political, and economic well-being of Asians in the United States, and particularly here in Northeast Ohio. As you have mentioned, this is something that has happened on a cyclical basis throughout history. And there's people ask questions after it happens, like, what can we do? How did this happen? And the thing is, there are ways we could prevent this from happening, and there are ways we could respond to what has happened. One of the things that we talk about is we have to break through the stereotype. Asians have often been seen as this model minority. They are the ones that are held to this example of like, oh, look, if you work hard, you try hard, you'll be successful. And in a way, that sort of pits us against other groups out there. And at the same time, we are not a homogeneous group. Some of us are successful, yes, but there are others out there within this Asian group who are struggling, who also needs help. So we cannot be seen as one homogeneous group of people. Something else we have to do is break the stereotype of being seen as submissive, especially for our Asian females. The media has portrayed us as the submissive, exotic people out there. And we're not that, okay? We have to speak up. We have to make sure that we are heard. Asians as a group are people that are not really on the forefront of being out there protesting, participating in civil actions, political actions. But we have to do our part to make sure that we are heard. There is strength in numbers. Without us reporting what's happening to us, these incidents of hate will continue. Statistics have shown that there is 150% increase in the number of hate incidents. But we know that is greatly underreported. Asians as a group are seen as people who don't want to make waves. They don't want to be troublemakers. So we have to make sure that we get the stuff out there. We need to let people know how severe and pervasive all this is. It's a serious issue that we have to deal with as an Asian group. That's why we tell people, go and report this. We have AAPIHateCrimes.org. We have different governmental agencies. In my daytime job, I work for the Ohio Civil Rights Commission. We're an state agency that helps fight discrimination in the areas of employment, housing, public accommodation, credit, higher education. There are so many different agencies out there that we need to make use of to report all the things that are happening. And also, it's very important that we get involved. In the past and in other generations, I know that the idea is to, don't make any waves, be quiet, just work hard, keep your head down, and everything will be okay. But that's not true anymore. We have to make sure that we are heard. We have to make sure that we get involved. We join local AAPI organizations. We support Asian businesses, okay? And also we could do little things by being an ally, stand up against hate when we see it. And I like to conclude by reading a poem, a really quick poem that I think is really important that highlights the dangers of indifference. It's by this German pastor, Martin Niemöller. Sorry if I butchered his name. But he wrote this as a reflection of the time during the Holocaust and the rise of the Nazis. He writes, "First they came for the socialists and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me and there was no one left to speak for me." I think this is something that we need to remind ourselves that even if it doesn't affect you right away, eventually it will affect you. We all need to stand together in this, united. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The next person we're going to hear from is Dr. Amy Lee. She is the chair of the board of Asian Services in Action, which is, we'll all let her tell you about it. Is Dr. Lee, are you here?
I am.
Fabulous. Welcome.
So Dr. Lee and I have the same last name, but we are not related. But we actually all are one. We have more in common than we have differences. After all, we all want health, happiness, hope, and bright futures for our children. But all some people can see are skin color and eye shapes, the differences, and they hate. As president of the Board of Asian Services in Action, I am so proud of this agency, which provides social services and healthcare not only to Asian Pacific Islanders, but to Congolese and to Caucasians and other Americans. They welcome anyone who comes through their doors because they see what we have in common. As a medical student, they taught us about the head and the heart. At Northeast Ohio Medical University, where I work, we teach our students how to use their heads and how to have a heart, and that they should embrace all patients, no matter what creed or color, because we have more in common than we have differences. So how do we stop the hate? One, as our previous speaker said, we can support our communities, eat at our restaurants, bakeries, and buy at the small businesses. Two, support agencies like Asia, which provides compassionate and culturally linguistic appropriate care to anyone who comes through their doors. But three, educate your friends and people outside of your circle, especially legislators who have the ability to create policies which affect our communities, because a few of them only see the differences. But remember, we have more in common than we have differences, and we are stronger as one. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. Dr. Lee was the second of 5 Asian American women that you'll hear from this morning. The next is Madhu Sharma. She is the Executive Director of the International Institute in Akron. Madhu, are you online?
I am.
Welcome.
Thank you, Professor Lee. Dr. Lee, I appreciate your statement from Asia. I'm the director of the International Institute of Akron, for those of you on the call that don't know me. I've been in meetings all day and I did not plan a prepared statement. But what's resonating, with me this week and has already been stated by Vera and also Dr. Lee is that, Asian Americans, we have a tendency to seek to erase our pain of marginalization by staying silent. And, we're not the same as groups of Asians. And I want to acknowledge that I'm South Asian, and I understand that much of the hate, the recent uptick since March of last year until today has been targeting East Asians. I know that you all have stood by the Asian American community and other communities of color throughout the legacy of the last 5 years and really the history of hate that we have seen resonating in our nation. I felt today it was really important for me to share my own personal story. This is not easy for me. I don't speak like most Asians. We don't want to speak publicly in ways that are not necessarily valued in our communities. But I believe showing our vulnerability, sharing the pain of the hate that we've been targets of is really important. And I think giving voice to our experiences is really going to erase the rhetoric that there's not enough of us to be statistically relevant. Because as we saw, these violent deaths that we've experienced recently and over the last year, the growing incidence of hate that's targeting not only Asian Americans, but communities of color, I believe it's really important for us to give voice to our experiences. I'm probably stalling a bit, so I'll cut to the chase. Last year, I think it was in June of, no, 2 years ago, June of 2019, Donald Trump made some statements against 4 minority congresswomen. He told them to go home. One of them was an immigrant. The other 3 were born in the United States and US citizens. What they shared in common that they were all women of color. And within 2 weeks of that happening, I walked my dog on the hike and bike trail in my neighborhood every morning. And 2 weeks after he said this on the news, a woman spit at me and drove her bike past me. I didn't speak. I thought, well, that's just a coincidence. She decided to spit as she was passing me, but she came back. And when she passed me and came back, she spit at me again. This time it hit me and she told me to go home. I am an immigrant. I was not born in the United States. I don't speak in a way that people always identify me as someone that wasn't born here. But that experience to me was painful. And I didn't call the police. I did tell some community members and friends who were trusted, because I was in pain and I was angry, but I didn't call the police. And many people advised me, you should probably call the police. That's an assault. For those of us who are lawyers, it might be the finer point, but yeah, it is actually an assault. The point is, to report it to the police might actually have captured the data that there's an increase of hate that's really connected to the speech that comes out of our leadership. And then, obviously we saw that growing and growing. And when COVID came to the United States, it became, the tool that was used to really vilify and heighten the stereotype of Asians being disease-ridden and dirty. It's interesting, we're so often either the model minority or the dirty, smelly, diseased, right? And my experience, I felt, was really important for me to share tonight in this vigil, so soon after the events in Atlanta. I've been really angry by the rhetoric, but also the language coming out of law enforcement. This is not a new anger. Obviously, we have all felt this anger, and we felt this anger last summer too. And it's a growing unrest, I feel. I'm an immigration lawyer, and I've been an immigration lawyer my whole life. I have voice and I give voice to immigrants, but what I've been realizing recently is I have to give voice to my own vulnerabilities as an Asian American and a woman of color, and join forces with all of you on this call, all of our community partners, the other immigrant populations I've served, and other communities of color that IIA stands behind and has stood behind, while each and every one of us has seen racism run rampant and flourish. I would encourage us there's 2 bills in Congress right now. And all of you, I know I want to make a call to action, can reach out to your local representatives and push for the No Hate bill. It supports funding for community organizations so that there can be hotlines to report hate crimes. We have these throughout Ohio, but it allows for more funding and more local community-based organizations. It also helps in data collection of hate crimes. And finally, it also allows for more alternative forms of healing for victims of hate crimes, including counseling. And also the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act. I think some of you may have seen that Biden does support that act, but we want to push our representatives to make these laws so that we're protected, or at least that we have recourse to raise our voices, as I feel need to do right now. And I feel some shame in having stayed silent. And I just hope that each of you on the call will speak out and share your own stories, and make sure that even when those stories aren't a crime, we know that when hate is flourishing in our communities and we're speaking about it openly instead of hiding it and going about our day. So thank you, Dr. Lee, for inviting me to speak today. And thank you, all of you, for joining this vigil.
Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Alice Hsu. She's a student at Hudson High School. Alice, are you here?
Yes.
Welcome.
Hi. Okay. So hello, everyone. My name is Alice. I am 15 and a sophomore at Hudson High School. First off, I want to thank everyone for being here tonight, and I've seen an incredible amount of support from the community around me, and that really means a lot. But I also want to recognize that 8 lives were taken this week, and 6 of those were Asian American women. And there has been an increase in violent crimes against Asian Americans. And to me, this really was no surprise. The killing of people of color continues to persist in our country. Hate crimes continue to persist in our country, and hatred continues to persist in our country. Yet the stories have always seemed very distant to me. This was the first time I really knew of someone who looked like me being murdered out of hate, and that really shook me. Because I grew up in Hudson, I've always been pretty sheltered. Where my story diverges from those 6 Asian American women who were killed is here. I am an American-born Chinese who grew up in a mainly white community. I've never felt that my life was in danger because of my racial identity. But from a very young age, I understood that I was different from my peers. When I entered kindergarten, I had to take special classes to learn better English because I grew up speaking Mandarin. In first grade, I stopped packing lunch because I became famous for bringing what my classmates deemed as poop noodles, my favorite dish made by my mom. And my teachers still cannot pronounce my last name. So I changed myself. I believed that if I didn't fit into the Asian stereotype, that no one would see me as different because of my race. I started playing soccer because I believed that being athletic made me different from all the other Asians. I focused on English and history because I thought being good at science or math made me more like the other Asians. And I didn't really have very many Asian friends. My only Asian friend my age deemed me a banana, yellow on the outside, but white on the inside. And sometimes I even forgot that I was Asian. To be truthful, I resented a lot of other Asians for contributing to the stereotype that I felt confined in. I grew up with the privilege of protection, but I still feel the effects of stereotyping and oppression against Asians. There really isn't much I alone can do as an Asian person to break away from the stereotype. We need the help of our community to change the stereotype, to break the stereotype. For a long time, I couldn't tell if what I did was A, being part of the stereotype, or B, trying to deny the stereotype, or C, because I actually wanted to do that thing. But the past year has taught me a lot. At the beginning of the school year, our school started a club called Dear Asian Youth. And the purpose of this club was to empower and uplift Asian students. And in this club, we began to talk about our actual experiences, and we began to feel really heard. And being heard and being seen really made a difference to me. Because when I began to feel heard, I began to speak. And because I felt loved, I advocated for more love in our community. Last month, our school decided to play music for Black History Month. I saw firsthand how hard it was to do this at our school with the outdated PA system. Yet the administration at our school put in a big effort to make it happen. And that small move made a big difference to me because I understood that my school cares about advancing and making our school more equal towards people of different races. I saw that my principal, my administration, my peers care about minorities and they care about me. And that's when I began to feel safe. These Asian women were killed. But when we ask what we can do, I know there is a solution. I know we can move out of this never-ending shade. And for my Asian brothers and sisters, I offer this. You can only be heard if you speak up. Speak up, tell your experience. The community surrounding you is more than willing than you might think to help you, to celebrate you. but often they don't know what is harmful if you don't tell them. Too often we, as a fairly new group to the US, fear being hated if we speak up. But I encourage you to step up and do so, because you are saying something that might help another Asian person feel accepted for once in their life. And we as a community need to support each other. And for the allies of the Asian American community, I first want to thank you for being here. Thank you for standing with me. But I also ask 3 things of you. Number 1, stand for all oppressed communities. Black History Month celebrates Black people and their accomplishments, but my principal and my school recognizing it made me feel more safe as a minority. A step in the right direction for any minority group is truly a step in the right direction for all minority groups. We can only stop the killing and hatred of Asians if we stop killing and hatred. Number 2, listen. Being heard empowers people. It empowers people to speak, and it empowers people to listen too. Only when we truly see and hear others can we have a more harmonious and loving environment and community. Learn about the issues and amplify the voices of the oppressed. And number 3, do the little things. Saying Happy Chinese New Year might make someone feel like you accept their culture. Smiling at someone and saying hello makes someone feel seen. Voting and standing with the right causes is important. Treating people with kindness makes all the difference. So how do we move forward? Proverbs 10:12 says that hatred stirs up conflict, but love covers all wrongs. Love each other. I see hope in the future. As a young person, I do not fear, because I truly believe this world will be made better through our love for each other. And so I leave you with my favorite line from Amanda Gorman's The Hill We Climb. For there is always light if only we are brave enough to see it. If only we are brave enough to be it. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. That was wonderful. Our next speakers are 2 members of an organization, OPAL. And actually, I'll let them say what their organization is. So Tessa and Maya, are you online?
Yes. Yes, we're here.
All right. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for having me. It's really difficult for me to be here today, but I know it's important, and I want to share a little bit about OPAL, the organization that Maya and I are representing. My name is Tessa Schwan. I am one of the statewide co-directors for OPAL. We are a statewide membership-based and membership-led community organization. We're building collective power and leadership centered around AAPI women and non-binary trans people in Ohio. And I want to thank the speakers who came before me today. I've heard, from all of you that we have stayed silent in the past. I know firsthand what it feels like to be invisible and to be afraid to speak. And I know that there is a history of cultural factors, leading to Asian American and Pacific Islander communities sometimes staying silent. I think that's true. But I also know that there's a difference between a history of always being silent and a history of being erased. Through my time with OPAL and through my own self-education, especially after my college years, I've learned about the long legacy of Asian American and Pacific Islanders, especially women and queer and trans activists in the United States who did speak out and who did organize and who did work for justice and equity. There's so many examples of that, and it's not an accident or a coincidence that we don't know about that history. It's not an accident that we don't know about the communities 200 years ago who faced the same kind of hate. And they faced exclusion and violence that stems from the same root causes, which is, white supremacist systems that are impacting us today. So I just want to name that as one of the causes, that these things have happened before, and the fact that our kids are not learning that in public schools is very harmful and it needs to change. I think that's one of the key interventions that need to happen as a result of this horrible violence and the attention that it's getting. I want to name that anti-Asian racism is a feminist issue. It's an intersectional issue because white supremacy impacts all Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. It impacts all people across the country, but it doesn't affect all of us equally. And women and girls are bearing the brunt of the violence, 2 to 3 times more likely to report being attacked over the past year. It's also impacting young people and our elders, immigrants who don't speak English, refugee communities and undocumented communities in very different ways. So I want to name that. And in addition to all of the solutions that have been mentioned, I think just on behalf of OPAL, we believe that building collective power within our communities, organizing so that we can collectively change our world and build the world that we deserve is really important. Also building solidarity with other communities, not pushing for solutions that might bring harm onto Black and Brown communities. So with that, I want to pass it over to Mai, who's going to share her story. Mai is an OPAL member based in Akron, very talented storyteller, artist, leader in her community. And I'll pass it over to Mai.
Thank you for the introduction, Tessa. Good evening, everyone. Once again, my name is Mai. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and my ethnicity is Hmong. Before I begin, I would like to take this time to just thank all the organizers for holding this safe space. And I would also like to thank the community members who are here this evening. I would also like to recognize the 8 lives that were lost and the many more which have been impacted by the devastating rise of violent attacks against our community. So just a little background about myself. I was born in a refugee camp in Thailand, and my family and I came here to the United States in 2004. And we are actually one of the last families from our camp to come to the US. And I have been here in Northeast Ohio ever since. Today, I'll be sharing my personal story with racism and how it really impacted my growth and my academic career choice. So in 2017, my sister and I, we were at a laundromat. And I remembered that we were just kind of like folding our clothes, getting ready to go home when we overheard 2 middle-aged white women aggressively kind of stating that we needed to go back to our country. And so I remember just looking at my sister, kind of appalled and taken back by what we had heard. And during that time, I remembered seeing and hearing lots of stories of kind of like crimes or hate crimes against many people of color. And so I just told my sister, like, hey, let's just hurry up, let's go. I've always been taught to just try to avoid like confrontation, try not to get into any like sorts of fights or anything like that. And so right before we were going to leave, one of the women had felt compelled to push a cart into my sister. And my sister was just 12 at the time. And I remembered, like, it just took me so long to register like what had happened. And it was very heartbreaking because I told my sister, like, let's just go, like, let's just leave here. And I came home that day and I cried because I cried because I couldn't protect my sister. I couldn't protect myself, and I chose not to speak up. But part of it too was that I couldn't find my voice to speak up, but because of that event, it has really pushed me to find my voice. It's pushed me to learn more about my history and to encourage others to learn more about their history and to learn more about others, and really too, to stand up against this model minority myth. And recently, my aunt had came up to me and she was telling me to not go out too much because she was scared that I was going to get attacked. And this really hit me hard because I realized like there's an ongoing pandemic right now, and she's telling me to not go out, not because of the pandemic, but because she was afraid that I was going to get attacked. And that to me was just so heartbreaking because, you know, like the rise of hate crimes against our communities is real. And Asian women remain particularly like vulnerable to racialized misogyny. And so my heart really goes out to my community members. And so to end, I would like to end this by encouraging people and everyone to find your voice, to speak up, to protect not only yourself, not only your communities, not only your families, but to protect your culture, you know, your history. And yeah, thank you. Thank you for giving me this space.
Thank you so much, Maya and Tessa, really powerful testimony. If you have read the news recently about violence against Asian Americans, you know that there have been reports about what the numbers are, right? The numbers of assaults and incidents that target Asians during the year of COVID. Many of those numbers come from an organization in California called Stop AAP I Hate. And we have here with us today on the phone, Dr. Russell Jung. Dr. Russell Jung is one of the co-founders of Stop AAP I Hate. And he has some thoughts to share with us. Russell Jung happens to be my best friend from high school. And he has now become a leader, a real leader in the Asian American community. I'm so happy to have him here. Russell, what do you have to share with us? You are, I see his number here, so I know he's here, but I don't know if he can be unmuted. There. Oh. So for the administrators, the number that starts with a 1510, I don't know if you're able to unmute him. You know, while they're working. Oh.
Okay. Hi, everyone.
There he is.
Thanks, Brent, and thank you for inviting me to this vigil. Again, I'm Dr. Russell Jung, co-founder of Stop AAP I Hate, and Brantley's best man at his wedding. But I join you tonight in mourning and grieving the families, with the families of the victims in Atlanta. And like you, I share my outrage, my anger, my distress, my hurt, and my pain over not only what's happened in Atlanta, but on both coasts, the continued violence that we've seen against our elders and those with mental illness who've been shot by the police. We at Stop AAP I Hate began exactly 1 year ago tracking the racism against Asian Americans. And to date, we have nearly 3,800 personal accounts from Asian Americans of how they faced discrimination and harm. And if you read what I've been reading every day, the horror, the trauma, the vitriol, when you see how hateful people are towards Asian Americans, how they've been angry and fearful and direct that towards Asian Americans, for me, actually, the shootings were sadly not surprising. People have been pushed and shoved, been yelled slurs and profanities, and those who are most vulnerable have been attacked. In our data, women are harassed 2.3 times more than men. And so for me, it isn't surprising that this Atlanta shooter targeted Asian American women. Children and elderly are also disproportionately impacted. So we're grieving tonight and mourning not only tonight for the victims of Atlanta or those harmed by in the attacks you've seen on the media, but the daily violence that we've been experiencing across the nation in a widespread manner and in an institutionalized manner where policies have been enacted to exclude us, to cut migration, to cut Chinese scientists, to cut refugees, to cut H-1B visas. We've been constantly marginalized and excluded in the last couple of years, but that's been our history as Asian Americans. I just want to know that we are in a state of siege, and when threatened like this, a lot of people go into flight or fight mode. And some of us want to fight back and arm ourselves. Others are fleeing. They're staying indoors, like the last speaker said. The grandparents are saying to stay away. We're keeping our kids away from schools. Some people freeze and aren't even aware of the racism directed at them. They disassociate and dismiss things as trivial. So I'm seeing all these responses, but I think the most adaptive response now is to flock. And that's what you're doing tonight. I see Asian Americans from all walks of life, from executives to data scientists, from celebrities to high school students, coming together, flocking to protect ourselves, to console ourselves, and to strengthen ourselves. I see us flocking together, returning to Chinatowns, drinking boba, and being on guard for our elders. And I see or hear you tonight flocking together, sharing our grief, consoling one another, and finding strength in our flock. So I want to encourage you tonight to keep on flocking, to see each other as a community together, strengthened by each other's presence. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Russell, for sharing that with us. You know, Russell mentioned that grandparents are, telling their grandchildren to stay in to be safe. But the other thing is also happening. If you have seen some of the video of assaults on old people in San Francisco, one of those videos of a 90-year-old man being shoved to the ground and he later died. That video took place 2 blocks from my parents' house in San Francisco. And my father is gonna turn 90 this year. And the video is a picture of somebody attacking my father. This scourge of violence is can't be tolerated. Right? Okay. I'm so glad to be able to bring Russell on. He was always just a little smarter than me. Actually, he's not on the line, right? I don't want him to have heard that because I would never say that to him. That is.
I heard that. I heard that.
Shoot. Our next speaker, so we have heard a number of voices of Asian Americans sharing their experiences. We're now going to hear from others who are standing up in solidarity with us, and we're so grateful to have them. So I'm going to introduce Dr. Sheldon Rice, who is the interim head of the University of Akron's Inclusion and Diversity Office. And he's going to introduce our next speaker. So Dr. Rice.
Good evening. We will now hear words of solidarity from our community at large. We will begin with Ms. Michaela Holley, who serves as the regional representative for U.S. Senator Sherrod Brown. Ms. Holley.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Okay.
Yes.
In advance, I wanted to let you all know that in the times of COVID, I am home with my 8-month-old. So if you hear a little baby in the background, please, just don't be alarmed. Hopefully she doesn't scream through this. But before I begin, I wanted to start by giving thanks. I wanted to thank all of the organizers for pulling together such an incredible event within less than 24 hours. This is an incredible event, and I wanted to thank the participants. It's incredible to see that over 200 people have joined and to come in solidarity and to commemorate the lives that we have lost to senseless violence this past week. And I also want to thank you all for extending an invitation to Senator Sherrod Brown and allowing me to be here this evening to present a letter on his behalf. And finally, I want to also say thanks to all of the speakers and to everyone who shared their own personal stories and experiences this evening. I can tell you from me personally, it truly made all the difference for you to be able to open up and share your personal experiences, which I know is not the easiest thing to do for anyone. And so I truly thank you all for being here today and sharing such powerful words and your experiences this evening. And with that, I would like to share a letter that the Senator prepared for you all this evening. Dear friends, thank you for your activism, for coming together to support our Asian American sisters and brothers, and for speaking out against hate in our state and around the country. We speak with one voice as proud Ohioans. Racism, bigotry, and hate are not welcome in our great state. We will not tolerate threats or violence against our neighbors. Even before the hate-fueled murders in Atlanta, the Asian American and Pacific Islander community in Ohio and around the country has endured threats, harassment, and violence over the past year, and it must end. Many of you here today are a testament to how Asian American and Pacific Islander culture has enriched Ohio throughout our history. You are business owners and entrepreneurs, educators and students, workers and advocates, and leaders in our community. You serve our nation honorably in the military and are a part of the fabric of our state and of our country. To any Ohioan who feels scared or threatened right now, know that we support you and will do all that we can to make you and your family feel safe and supported in our state. Please call on my office if we can be of assistance. Dr. King taught us that progress never rolls in on the wheels of inevitability. It rolls in because we fight for change and we refuse to accept the injustices around us. We take the torch our elders passed to us in this fight for justice. We carry it as long as we can, and then we pass it to the next generation who will bring us a little closer to the just and equal society we are all striving to create. That's what you all are doing. Thank you for all of your work in making a difference in the fight for justice in our state. Sincerely, United States Senator Sherrod Brown. Thank you all for your time this evening. I will put my contact information in the chat. If you ever need anything, please feel free to reach out. Thank you, Dr. Lee, and all of the organizers.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rice.
Thank you. My heart is shattered after the tragic acts of violence in Atlanta that took 8 lives. There indeed is a need for love, compassion, and understanding now, perhaps more than ever before. On behalf of the Office of Inclusion and Equity, Rethinking Race, the Office of Multicultural Development, and the Pan-African Studies Program, please know that we are praying for the victims and their families. To our Asian American, and Pacific Islander students, faculty, staff, and the entire Akron community, I want you to be confident of our steadfast support. We are not standing behind you, but rather with you, as you confront racism and racist views in this community and the world over. At this point, we call on all stakeholders to recognize that America's strength rests with its diversity, and thus it's imperative to stand in unity and fight against all criminal and inhumane acts that target a segment of its population. We call on all faculty, students, and staff and the entire University of Akron community to actively defend or counter all forms of hate and racism against people of Asian descent and other minority populations on campus and in the larger society. We recognize that hate and crime against any member of our society really affects us all. To this end, I am reminded of the words of Gandhi. It's the action, not the fruit of the action, that is important. You have to do the right thing. It may not be in your power, may not be in your time that there will be any fruit. But that does not mean that you stop doing the right thing. You may never know what results come from your action. But if you do nothing, there will be no result. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rice. Our next speaker is Tamala Skipper of the Fair Housing Contact Service. Tamala. Let's see.
Just having a little technical difficulty.
There you are.
Sorry about that. Yes, my name is Tammy Skipper. I'm the Executive Director of Fair Housing Contact Service. And I just want to let you know that our agency stands in solidarity with our Asian American brothers and sisters. We fight for the housing rights of our community, and we will do any and everything within our power to make sure that we are supporting, befriending, whatever it takes to make sure that the community as a whole, people of color, our Asian American brothers and sisters just feel welcome in our community. We are available. You can reach us. I'll put my contact information in the chat. If you ever feel that you've been discriminated against in your housing, myself, the Ohio Civil Rights Commission, Vera Boggs, all of us are available to help out. So please accept our stand in solidarity. And I'm a person who loves. I love you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tammy. Our next speaker is Judy Hill of the Akron NAACP. And so Judy.
Thank you, Brett. First of all, I want to say thank you as well to you and Greta for setting this up and making it so that we can all help you understand, we support and understand what you're going through. I also want to take a moment and thank Alice and all of the young people who spoke for their open, honest vulnerability. I learned something today. I knew about some of the cultural nuances, but how strong it is and how much you take before you stand and say something. Gosh, we've been accused of saying and standing and yelling loudly. So I just wanted to make sure you understood that we are here with you and we stand in solidarity against the violence that has definitely everyone is against our Asian brothers and sisters. On March 17th, we put on our Facebook page Stop Asian Hate, the hashtag Stop Asian Hate, because we agree, we understand, we get it. And based on all of the speakers that I've heard today, I think we all understand that it should bring us all closer together, because we have a mission to help others understand our humanity and what we stand for together. The NAACP stands for the Political, Educational, Social, Economic, Equal Rights in order of eliminating racial discrimination for all Americans. We know that when one is downtrodden, we are all affected. We can't live in harmony unless we are all reaping the benefits of this justice society that we live in. And so I just wanted to make sure they understood, you understood that we are here with you, we stand with you, and want to work well with you as we fight hate, no matter what it looks like and no matter who it's against. I'm reminded of a scripture, and if you don't mind, and I love the young people who were quoting scriptures before me. Romans 12:2, it says, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to trust, test, and approve what God's will is, his good pleasure and perfect will. We all have a responsibility, one by one, to carry out this message of stopping hate, no matter where, what, how. No longer will it be accepted. And we are all in this together, hand in hand, to make sure that we end this racial inequities. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Roseanne Winter of the League of Women Voters.
Good evening.
Roseanne.
I speak for the League of Women Voters nationally, statewide, and locally. We have a large network of leagues, all of whom are fully committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion in principle and in practice. Diversity, equity, and inclusion are central to our country's success in creating a more perfect democracy. Thus, we stand firmly with the Asian community, as with all communities that lend strength to the fabric of our democracy. We shall work alongside them to protect their right to live a free and safe life as part of the greater American community. You can contact me and any of our leagues anytime. We're on the net, and let us know where we can help. We are reaching out to all communities to make sure that their rights are protected. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And next we have Cynthia Peoples speaking on behalf of one of the programs of the League of Women Voters. Cynthia.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to thank everyone for being here. And like Professor Lee just said, I initially was here to represent the Real Talk program, which is a relatively new program, an extension of the League of Women Voters that puts a microphone, a loud megaphone in the face of the very issues that we're talking about right here. We're talking about inequity, injustices, indignities, discrimination, shaming, and racism. And this is a platform that I'm very passionate about, and it embodies everything that we're talking about right now. It is creating an empowering space for these voices to be loud and to be proud about who they are. And I say I was originally here on behalf of the Real Talk program, but I'm really here on behalf of my mother, who was a Korean immigrant that came to this country and that walked in these ugly shadows, these violent shadows, and these abusive shadows. And myself, growing up as a Korean German and watching the struggles that my mother went through as a woman who could barely speak English, and my father, whose primary language was English, and watching the dichotomy between the two. Very painful to watch that, and looking at how a country that my mother loved and left her country to come over here and flourish, hated her, and let her know every single minute that she was here how much it hated her, to the point where she wanted me to tamp down my Korean heritage and culture and to be fully Americanized, to the point where she wanted me to physically modify the way I looked so that I could look more American, so that I wouldn't endure what she endured. And didn't want me to learn my own language because she didn't want me to have an accent, so that I would be more successful and more accomplished in this country. And as I'm listening to all these stories tonight, specifically my Asian sisters, and how I myself have tamped down my own stories, my mother's stories, my mother's family stories, because you don't talk about those, you don't share those, you don't create that loud space for yourself. But I am very loud and advocate for my children. Anybody in this space that knows me knows that I will get very loud and very aggressive for my children, especially in their school environment. And it's funny being in this space. I'm just sitting and thinking about, as I'm listening to these stories, how often I don't put my own personal stories up at the forefront. And I've been frantically helping these amazing coordinators coordinate this event today. And as I've been sitting with Professor Lee on the phone, and Greta and Brittany and everybody else that's in this space trying to pull this event together, the rage was just swelling inside of me as I was thinking about the fact that we need to create this space for people that tamp down their own voice. So I want to thank everybody that came here tonight to lift these voices, to listen, to offer solidarity, and to help everybody move forward. Because yes, as it's been said, an injustice for one is an injustice for all. And I thank everybody for being here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. I will have a few words later to say about the work that Cynthia has put in to make this event a success. Sunny Matthews represents the entity called Dimensions of Isms, and she has some words for us. Sunny.
Hi. First, I want to thank you all for creating this space. I really have just 4 things I wanted to say really quickly. One is I hear and affirm you. I think it's very, very important for people who are affected directly to be the voices we hear. So to hear the stories from students and people who were sharing, and to hear Professor Lee talk about his father moves and inspires me. I want to follow your lead and encourage others to do the same. I don't have all the answers, but what I do know is that silence is violence. And I've seen on my timeline, and I've seen in real life, especially this past year, but for a while now, people being silent to what is happening to Asian Americans. And when the young lady was sharing about what happened to her at the laundromat, there were people there who were silent. And so I hope that we start to speak up more for all those that are affected. And one last thing, I really want to encourage people to challenge those who are trying to separate the truth from this matter. This was a hate-based crime. That's a cold, hard truth. And it was based on gender, and it was based on race, and it was based on all of that. And when people try to separate that matter, or say things like he had a bad day, or try to have the more empathy for the criminal, then the victims, we cannot remain silent. Thank you.
Thank you. That was powerful. Our next speaker is Kathy Ress of the Akron Area Interfaith Council. Kathy.
Good evening. It's good to be in flock with you and to not be alone, but to be with kindred spirits. I also represent the Akron Interfaith Immigration Advocates that walks with the undocumented, going to ICE, going to federal court, going to doctor appointments, going to houses, all kinds of things. So the Akron Interfaith Council and the local interfaith community stand in solidarity with the Asian American community as it grieves the many incidents of racism and bigotry that have increased in the past year. We join with you in combating this bigotry and will work to confront the bias of religions that might be wrongly used for discrimination, exploitation, and exclusion. In the Talmud, it is said that all people are descendants from a single person, so that no person can say, my ancestor is better than yours. God created humanity from the four corners of the earth, yellow clay and white sand, black loam and red soil. Therefore, the earth cannot declare to any part of humanity that it does not belong here, that this soil is not their rightful home. Thank you.
Thank you. And our next speaker is Andre Campbell from the United Way of Summit in Medina. We've had the pleasure of working together. Andre.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. Hello, everybody. It's hard, so many great and powerful words have already been said. So I'm just grateful for everyone who's worked very courageously and expeditiously to make this event happen. I'm definitely grateful for, all the voices that have spoken their stories, just your courage, your power, your grace, and also your resiliencies. And so in the most solemnness of times, I'm just grateful to be in the room. And so thank you for everyone for being a part of this moment. I'm the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Vice President over at United Way. And I just want to start off with personal words that, I grieve at the acknowledgement and the actualization of the horrendous acts of racism, xenophobia, and violence that have taken place in our nation and in our world. And in this instance, our Asian and Asian American community. So we at United Way of Summit in Medina, we stand with our community against these acts of injustices and lock arms with our Asian American, and Pacific Islander communities, all of our communities of color, and everyone else, all of our friends who are in this fight to make our world a better place. Any and all acts of hatred is unacceptable. And so our hearts go out to all the lives that were lost and afflicted, the families and friends of the victims, and everyone across our community, near and far, who have been impacted and felt pain. Please know that we'll continue to do our best to act thoughtfully and strive as an ally and a support to all of our family, our friends, our colleagues, and our community members to whom we serve. So I'm thankful to be here tonight, and grateful for everyone being a part of this, and hope to see you all again soon.
Thank you, Andre. And I think that we have at least one more speaker who can say a few words on behalf of Mayor Horrigan. Yamini Atkins is here to do that. Yamini.
Hello, I just wanted to just say so many wonderful and powerful and passionate words have been spoken already on behalf of Mayor Dan Horrigan's office, the mayor's office. Certainly the hearts and sympathies go out to the families that have lost their loved ones in this senseless hate crime. We want to thank Professor Lee for organizing this event. And I think that it is just extremely important that we were all able to come together and to share our grief and our thoughts. And this is what we need to be doing when these type of things happen. So thank you.
Thank you. I want to acknowledge that the organization of this has been a little chaotic, and my inbox is overflowing. If there is somebody who had signed up to speak who we lost track of, drop me a note in the chat, and we will come to you. But we are already at 18 minutes past the hour. And so what I'd like to do now is we're going to go into the last segment where we're going to use the candles. If you did get the message, I know that not everyone might have gotten this message. If you did get the message and you brought a candle, or if you have a phone that you can hold up that will light up. We will make use of that with sort of a moment of silence at the end of this. But before we do that, I just want to personally acknowledge, I don't know how to do this. People have been honoring me by saying, thank you for organizing this. I don't know how a Zoom Vigil works. I don't know how this platform works. I am not the one making it all function well. I did not have the time to sort of put together the program. I sent an email to a number of people who I said, it seems like we have to do this and we have to do this soon. And the response I got was just tremendous. And then the second email I sent out said, I really need help to do this. And so many people stepped forward. It's always dangerous to start to name names because you will leave somebody out. But I will take that risk by naming some of the people who really did come in and take the reins and take off, bite off big chunks of this to do. And those people include Dr. Rice, who stepped right in to help this happen administratively. Cynthia Peoples, who really was keep juggling sort of all the balls to try to organize the slate as it came forward. Greta Lax, who always comes through and steps in when there are important tasks to undertake. Brittany Ferguson Mike and Logan, who I just met, so I think your last name is Dussault. I apologize for that, who are helping in the back end to sort of make sure that the Zoom part of this is running well. And from my perspective, it seems to be running perfectly. So thank you all for helping to make this happen. Here's what I'd like to do now, and this was just a kind of a whim. I don't know if it will work. If you did bring a candle, if you would light it, and then if you have your cameras off, you might turn on your cameras so that we can see your candles. And then if you would like to switch to the grid view, the thought is that we may get an effect, a visual effect, from looking at the grid full of candles being lit that will be inspiring as we close this program. So let's take a minute to go ahead and do that. And then after a minute, I will close this out. I have a candle. So there are several pages of us. You might go ahead and flip through the pages and see the faces and the candles of all the people who are in solidarity with us tonight. Take the time you need. I celebrate all of you. I'm going to read a poem, and then when I'm done with that, I'd like us to spend a full minute, and I will let you know when the minute is up. You all know probably that a minute is a long time when you're trying to be silent. Right? A full minute in silence in honor of those who have died. So here's the poem. It's by Maureen Killeran. It's called Closing Words for Hard Times. No matter how weak or how frightened we may feel, we each have gifts that can make a difference in the world. In this coming week, may you do at least one thing to support the broken, to welcome the stranger, to celebrate what is worthy, to do the work of justice and love. Be strong, be connected. Each day, act so that you may be a little more whole. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. Before you leave, the last screen that will come up on the screen will be a list of all of the organizations who expressed their support for this event tonight. Some of them we had logos for, and so you can see that. Thank you all again. There will be more events related to this in the coming weeks, sponsored by other organizations. I can't tell you how moved I am that that so many people came to share this evening with us. So thank you.